Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Well, hi again, Maria. Thank you so much for coming back to the Legal Lounge.
I am so happy to be back. You know, I'm looking at my calendar. I'm looking forward to this, and I want to know when I'm coming back.
Yes.
Before I go.
Yes. And like we talked about in our last conversation, I think we share that passion and frustration of trying to get the right answers out there to all these legal questions that we see in social media.
100%. And not just getting the answers to them is battle the misinformation.
Yeah.
I think we're really having a challenge in here for people to understand that what is out there in social media, it not always is the truth, and it really would not apply to you. And it is important you still look to your professionals and the experts, and the amount of misinformation that I see day after day is very scary.
It is very scary because a lot of the responses, more so than the questions, are downright bad information, whether it's legal or otherwise. It's like, no, I would not say that. And I'm a family law attorney, and I see this day in, day out as my full-time job.
100%. And yes, the questions are great. These are questions that have to be asked. And people have to know the answers to these questions. It's just the way that they go about getting these answers. And there's also, you will agree with me, is when someone is going through a divorce, it's so particular and so personal that what happens to one person is not going to happen to the other. 100% is not going to. Yep. There's so many variables out there and things that change, you know, in the rules, in the law, finances, and everything. So it's very scary. I like that the people are asking the questions. I would like for people to ask the questions to the right experts.
So that's why we're here today on Legal Lounge. We both pulled some of the questions we saw that needed good answers to from professionals. Yes. And of course, this is not legal advice, but rather a discussion from the professionals on these very important questions. So I'm going to jump right into it. Our first question that we're going to go over is, quote, if my ex is now engaged and living with someone in the same house, am I still obligated to pay child support? That's a great question, because what I think they are confusing are the laws that pertain to child support in comparison to the laws that pertain to spousal support. Correct. They're very different.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, people tend to confuse them because for them, it's all money.
Yeah,
it comes from the full pile. It's a check you give, and they don't separate the reasons why you pay child support, which is calculated in a way very different that alimony is calculated.
Yep.
And then why you pay alimony and what is the amount of the alimony. And it's true that you would know on the legal side, but also financially, it changes the fact that if you're living with someone, if you're married, your expenses change, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you use to calculate alimony, but not specifically child support.
Yeah, so child support specifically is for the financial needs of the children and are paid effectively to provide that financial support and stability for the children when they're in the other household. So the way I like to tell my clients is let's say at parent one's house, you know, there's enough money to go around where the kids have filet mignon every night. Where at the other parent's house, they can barely get a bowl of rice. Well, child support is to be paid to make sure the children can have a good meal, may not be filet mignon necessarily, right, every night at both parents' houses. And it really has nothing to do with the financial and or living situation of the other parent to whom is receiving the child support. And that's very much differentiated from spousal support, because spousal support is financial support for the spouse that was determined to be dependent during the marital relationship. And so in that circumstance, yes, we would want to look into their living arrangement payment after the date of separation and after they've started receiving spousal support, because if they are quote unquote cohabitating under North Carolina law, then spousal support may terminate, but not child support.
Right. And the other thing is child support you're going to have to pay most likely until the kid turns 18 or graduates from high school.
Exactly.
Differently here in North Carolina, other states are different. But at the same time, the alimony not just changed for that, but there's also having to take into consideration that there's one thing about the lifestyle of the kid, and you need to make sure the kid has everything they need. Well, alimony is not quite like that. Mm-hmm. And that is another conversation I usually have with my clients is, yes, you more likely will not have the same lifestyle, right, when you separate and you get alimony.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. You can't suddenly duplicate the income.
Right. The income is the same. And then suddenly you have two homes and you have to do those calculations. And there's also the fact that the kids' needs are different. The kids may go to private school. Yeah. There's health insurance you have to pay for the kid. You not potentially have to pay health insurance from your ex-spouse, for your ex-spouse. So you had to pay for insurance. There's daycare. There's tutors. There's after-school activities. All those cost money. When we go into doing a budget, summer camp. Yep. I mean, there's so many things that take into consideration. Just because someone has someone that is living with them, helping them pay for half the rent or the mortgage, doesn't mean the kids' needs are going away. Yeah. Yeah. And you had to look into all those details when you talk about child support, especially.
Yeah. And go one step further for child support specifically. In North Carolina, we do have the North Carolina Child Support Guidelines. And up to a certain income level, if the gross income of both parties combined doesn't exceed a certain amount, we run a calculation. And whatever the calculator spits out, whatever number it is, that is presumed to provide for the financial needs of the children. Does it? I would argue at least 50% of cases, no, it doesn't. I like to cite the cost of diapers, especially when we're dealing with very young kids. Yes. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that could barely be paid for by the monthly amount of child support. But at the end of the day, based on the incomes and based on the custody schedule, which are the two primary numbers that the child support guidelines are based upon here in North Carolina, that's presumed to be fair for the children. Right. And then to your point, we also have the higher asset and net worth cases where, children are going to private school or they do have specific financial needs outside of the guidelines that also need to be addressed.
100%.
And so just because the other parent may have a new boyfriend or girlfriend or just because, they even got married, that doesn't remove the child's financial needs.
100%. And you're talking diapers. Let me tell you about a teenager driving for the first time and how much that cost in insurance.
You're talking personal stories here now?
Yes, I had two of them. I don't pay their insurance anymore, even though now it's cheaper for them. But yes, I mean, I was a single mom. I went through a divorce and my kid turned 15 and I had to pay insurance. And I was, holy mother of God, how am I going to pay this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. And can we talk food for teenagers too? Can we talk about that for a second? Yeah. I have boys. Yeah. They eat a lot. Yeah. Groceries are expensive. There's so many things that come into place that, yes, you're right. It's just very hard. And I know the system tries to do the best. Yep. The guidelines are very specific. And I think that's what people have a hard time with the guidelines. Because you put a number there and in their head, they don't think it's fair for them to be paying so much money when they feel the other parent is not paying bills maybe or enough bills. And I think the emotions come into place when you're talking about child support.
Or making enough money.
Or making enough money. Yeah. And I'm not going to pay for her to go to the spa. Well, no, you're not. That's not what you're paying.
Yeah.
You're paying for your kid's 16-year-old insurance that is probably like $1,000 a month.
Yeah. Or paying a portion of it because the child support is probably not that high.
It's not going to be that high. Right. Yeah. So, yes. Yeah.
And so, I guess status alert here. Public service announcement is children are expensive.
Oh, my God. Yes. So think about it.
I think all parents would agree. It's too expensive. But at the end of the day, we have children. Right? Yes. That's part of what we do. And we provide the best world that we can for our children. And yes, it comes with a dollar amount cost.
And it's your responsibility. Until that kid becomes an adult, it's your legal responsibility, whether the other parent is married or not, or has a boyfriend or girlfriend or anything else. You're still responsible for your children or a roommate. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Exactly. There's no conversation more romantic than discussing a prenup with your partner, right? Okay, maybe the song for your first dance does a bit more in the romance department. Speaking of emotions, though, the prenup is a very legal document that everyone has a very emotional reaction to. Many people avoid the prenup conversation because they feel it is an indication that the marriage will fail. But here's the truth. Half of all marriages already fail, regardless of whether the spouses had the prenup conversation or not. If you or someone you care about is getting married, would knowing what marriage involves legally be important? What about having the difficult conversations surrounding finances, career aspirations, and pursuing parenthood prior to the wedding date? If you are looking to build a solid foundation for your marriage, or you want the same for someone you care about, we are here to help you learn more about prenups from a position of knowledge, not emotion. To learn more about family law from a legal professional, book a consultation with a member of the Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegalnc.com. Okay, so here's another good one. I'm a stay-at-home mother with no income. My husband makes well over 6 figures. If we divorce, will I be granted half of what he makes until our kids are 18? Will I have to give up being home with my kids? I know. We see this a lot, actually.
I see that a lot.
Especially so we're here in Charlotte, and so we see, fortunately, because we are an investment banking town, right? And we're a financial city where a lot of families are able to sustain themselves on one party's income, generally the father, but it's been the mother as well. And so we have a stay-at-home parent or stay-at-home spouse that hasn't worked for years because they can focus on taking the kids to all of their necessary appointments, activities, etc., cleaning their house. And I know thinking about changing that lifestyle because you're separating and divorcing seems daunting, to say the very least.
It's very scary, especially because if you think about the stay-at-home parent that hasn't worked for 15 years, sometimes it's not because they don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
It's because they have a whole 15 years that they need to catch up.
Yeah.
They didn't have the time that probably the other parent had to climb the ladder and get all this good compensation and get this good income. So it's very scary, but it also is scary because most of the time when that happens, they don't understand the finances.
Yeah.
So that question is very interesting. You say, can I get half of what he makes until my kids are 18? Well, actually, there's 2 different issues here.
Exactly.
Again, you have the child support. I don't know if it's going to be half, but there's going to be child support. He will have to pay or she will have to pay some support according to the guidelines. And that will be calculated, but it's one part of the portion. Then you have, potentially you could be a dependent spouse. And if you are found a dependent spouse, you will be receiving alimony. Is that half of his income? I don't know. We don't know. Potentially, most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
But there's just 2 things that are separately. Yeah. And then they are forgetting the whole thing about the division of the assets and the debt of the marriage. It's no one independent. This is not, we were together, we had a kid, now I need to pay to get child support. This is, we created a life.
Yeah.
And we created a marital state.
Yep.
And that's what the finances come in. And you have the debt, you have the assets, you have the children with the child support, and then potentially a claim as a dependent spouse.
Yep.
So there's so many things that had to be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And it is very scary. And I do believe that the lifestyle and having to let go is one of the biggest fears. But in reality, I'll be honest with you, when I work with my clients and they start working with is our budget, which is not the financial affidavit the attorney will work or use for court. This is a true 100% honest. How much money do you spend? And then we adjust from there. A lot of them are very surprised.
Yeah.
Some of them think they spend more. A lot of them are spending not as much as they thought. Mm-hmm. But when they see the numbers clearly there, they have a little bit more of hope. And I think that's the biggest problem of that is the misinformation.
Yeah.
And this question to me is super scary. The answers that they get online are very scary too. And my thing is always, okay, you should talk to an attorney and then you should talk to also a financial professional because you can't just ask people, would I get half? What does that mean? What is half?
Yeah.
Is that half of 500,000? Are we talking $1 million? Mm-hmm. What are the needs of the kids? In reality, child support, there's guidelines, there's calculations. Just because a parent makes millions of dollars doesn't justify or mean the judge is going to say, well, half of the $1 million goes to the children.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the same thing with alimony.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that you had to separate and look in the context of this separation, in this situation. How long were you married?
Yep.
Were you married 15 years? Were you married 20, 25, 36? I just had a lady, she started working with her. She was married 45 years.
Yeah.
That changes,
Yeah.
right? 15 years to 45 years?
And I've had clients who were married less than 10 years.
Correct.
Very different analysis.
It's so different where you get to the numbers and you look, and that's the hard part about this too, is their numbers.
Yeah.
And that I do calculations.
Yeah.
The emotions get so mixed up with the numbers, and that's what makes people feel even worse about the situation.
And go one step further, I'm also thinking, especially with this question, will I have to give up being home with my kids? Because that's a very emotional question. And there's so many parts to that as an attorney. I think, okay, are you thinking about the house, the home you've created that you're in right now? Right. Or are you okay changing the house? Right. Is that house then paid off? Or is there a mortgage? Right. Is the mortgage with an outstanding balance of $1 million or $100,000? Right?
What's the interest rate?
What's the interest rate? Especially with the interest rates fluctuating so much over the past 5 years.
Right this moment, the interest rates are a big deal when it comes to the house.
Yep, and refinancing.
Or it means being present.
Yeah. Or does it mean being present? Does it mean being able to go to all the children's soccer practices and all the games and the swim meets?
Yeah.
And another part of this is she says kids, I think it's a she, yes, stay-at-home mother. Are the kids 10 years old?
I was going to say that.
Are they 16?
Right.
Are they almost out of the house, meaning, hey,
and
Mom,
starting to drive?
Starting to drive.
And get insurance?
And
that is expensive.
Right? That is expensive.
Right.
Do they have their own lives? So
correct.
You in a way, you may have a spousal support claim because you've been a stay-at-home spouse, but maybe you want to get a part-time job to help
get
supplement.
You ready.
Exactly.
Right. And then in 3-4 years, you don't need to be as present because believe me, once the kids go to college, it doesn't matter if they live in the same home. I'm telling you, I proof of that. They have their lives.
Yeah.
So then you can go ahead and do something that you wanted to do and support yourself.
Yeah. And go even further back in time is, well, did you enter the relationship before you became a stay-at-home spouse with a college degree already?
Right.
Or did you not finish high school? Like maybe.
Did you ever work?
Did you ever work? Yeah. Right. Maybe you want to finish and get your GED. Or maybe you're already certified to be a therapist. Right. You just got to, brush back up on some credentials and licensing.
Which doesn't mean you don't get any support.
Yeah.
Because you get support to get on your feet when you start working again, or maybe you need to recertify, or you have to, get into the field, and they give you a few years to really get somewhere that you can get a good income. Obviously, you're coming out in the workforce with 10 years gap, maybe 15 years gap. But I think that is the meaning. It goes both ways too. When the person that has to pay the support is like, well, this is my work. I work all these years. I work very hard, and having to understand that, yes, but you probably did it because you had someone at home that was helping you. Mm-hmm. So we're not saying everything has to go to the other side, but there's something so they can have the opportunity.
Yeah.
To really do something for themselves. You're talking 10, 15 years. But again, it depends, right? If you're talking to someone that's been with you for 40 years and never worked in her life.
Mm-hmm. Different analysis.
Well, that is a very different situation, right? Mm-hmm. For everything, legal, financially, and every point.
Everything in between.
You can see it. Like, it was going to be different. But 10 years?
Yeah.
15 years?
And let's think about how the courts even come up to spousal support. Spousal support is really based on necessary expenses as determined by a court.
Yes.
So let me preface that. The judge is not a financial advisor for either side.
Right.
The judge did not go through all the finances and figure out who's spending what on what groceries. Right. The judge is simply looking at financial affidavits from both sides and saying, okay, that's reasonable for groceries. Even if the judge cuts that grocery bill in half on their financial affidavit, and because you have 2 boys that your grocery bill is actually a lot higher,
100%.
The judge may not say that is necessary, right?
Yes.
And same vice versa for the supporting spouse. They may say, well, I'm used to having a $2,000 a month car payment. Okay. But that's not necessary because you are paying for 3 cars and you only need 1, right? And so you have these necessary versus not necessarily necessary expenses. And the judge will look at all of that and then tell you
what is necessary for you.
Exactly. Even though they've never lived a day in your life.
Yes.
Never come to your home, driven your car, met your kids.
Yes. That's why going to court, this is my announcement, is dangerous.
Can be very dangerous. Exactly.
Because you don't know. You're letting someone decide that doesn't know anything about you. And that's why it's so scary.
And so it actually brings me to another question, which is very much related. So I wanted to cite it. How do NC divorce laws pertaining to alimony work? No official legal advice needed. Check. That's why you came into a podcast. How does it work? If you came in with nothing and never worked or contributed to any household needs, is the spouse required to pay alimony if they decide it's time for a divorce? Thanks in advance.
What are the needs? What does that mean?
Exactly.
What is the contribution? What are we talking about? Yeah.
Going back to your question, well, how long was the relationship?
Yeah.
And yes, there have been cases where someone believes they're entitled to spousal support because it's only been a 5-year marriage. And maybe they are, but it may be minimal.
Right.
Also, what is the income of the supporting spouse? That's another factor, because if a household has been dependent on an $80,000 a year income, when you separate and now there's 2 households, well, here in Charlotte, all I'm going to say is you can't rent anything for less than $1,000 a month on your own.
And that is just a tiny little, probably studio apartment, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so when you then look at the necessary expenses of both sides, $80,000 is not, and we're not even talking if there's kids. We're just talking about, is there enough money to go around?
Right. And I think that is the biggest issue too, is because, okay, you're working in one household. You have this pile of money in this one place.
Yeah.
And you may have an okay life. And it feels you're doing all the things you want to do.
Yeah.
But that's because you're in one home.
Yeah.
Now, the moment you split, that money is split. The money is not there. And you could be as dependent as they come.
Yeah.
That's what I tell my clients. Yes, you are, but there's no money.
Yeah.
So unless you have a case where someone is hiding money or they're trying to be tricky with their income or things of that nature, that is really concerning too. And the other flip side is that someone didn't contribute anything.
Yeah.
And that is part of that too. What makes you a dependent spouse? Mm-hmm. You don't contribute financially, potentially, but there's other contributions to the relationship, which brings the emotions. And then how the law is going to apply to that obviously has nothing to do with numbers. I can't tell you, well, you contributed to washing the dishes for 3 years, so this means that you contributed $10,000. Like, I can't do that, right?
Yeah.
But the law has a way to figure out that's why you are made a dependent spouse. Yeah. However, you can put a number when there's no numbers.
Exactly.
It's just that the law can help you as much as there is to be divided. A lot of people want me to help them. And I'm like, there's nothing to be divided. You have a house and a bank account.
Yeah.
I can bring you, assets to be divided. Yeah. It's what's there. And alimony is so tricky.
Alimony is extremely tricky, especially North Carolina, where we don't have a calculator. Some other states have calculators.
They do, yes.
But we do not. Our legislature has continued to decide not to implement one. And honestly, for good reason. In North Carolina specifically, we do have places and counties, for example, where you can make a really, really good lifestyle off of $50,000 a year, for example. Right. But then there are cities like Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro, even Asheville's getting up there, where $50,000 does not go very far.
They're not going to go anywhere.
And so when the state creates these laws, it has to be applicable to every financial stratosphere, if you will.
Yes.
Workable. And it is hard to have a state with such different socioeconomic statuses in one state, in one jurisdiction, if you will, to have one calculator fit.
Yes.
And so when people come to me and in the consultation, they ask, well, how much alimony am I going to get? I've been doing this over a decade, by the way.
Yes.
I don't know.
There's no way to know. Yeah. I get those questions too. And I get people that said to me, well, I did the calculator online. And I'm like, which calculator?
Because it's not state sanctioned.
Are you in North Carolina? Because I do have clients in other states that we do have a calculator. Mm-hmm. But guess what? I have clients that if they were in North Carolina, probably they would not get alimony. But because there's a calculator, they may get some alimony in my other states that I'm working in.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, is this other spouse really able to pay this money because there's a calculator when the other spouse is actually working? Like, is that a thing? I think you're right. It creates a whole of situations there where are you going to be living?
Yeah.
Because that's how you get your needs. Yep. What you need for rent. Well, I've been living in Charlotte for 20 years. I need to pay rent in Charlotte. Well, then that's $2,000.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable need because you live in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So I do agree with that. But yes, I love when they said, I did the calculation.
Yeah.
I'm like,
okay. Not something enforceable here in North Carolina.
Just so you know, I need you to forget about the calculation because it's probably not going to go that way.
Yeah.
And I want to know where that website is.
Yeah. Can you also send me the link?
Yeah. I want to check it out.
Another one related to spousal support that we saw, and it says, tell me your North Carolina alimony spousal support stories. Was it, quote, I like to cite this, cut and dry for a 10-year marriage? What if there's unfounded abuse or infidelity claims separated right before the 10-year mark? What if we are dating during separation? Well, first off, there is nothing
cut and dry.
cut and dry about anything as it relates to spousal support.
100%. I love when I saw that one. I'm like, ooh, cut and dry. Yeah, no.
Literally nothing.
Nothing.
No. I appreciate that they point out that it's approximately a 10-year marriage. So that does give us, the divorce professionals, some guidance here. A rule of thumb, at least in here in Mecklenburg County, is judges tend to award spousal support for half the duration of the marriage, but that's not a statutory requirement, and that is not necessarily applicable in every situation. So, for example, I've had the case where after the date of separation, the parties continued to live out of the joint bank account for another 2 years. Well, guess what? Even though that money wasn't paid to the dependent spouse directly, that 2-year period may still count toward that half the duration of the marriage number. Or go one step further. Let's say that there has been a lot of financial abuse, maybe even infidelity. And so the judge may say, yeah, I know the rule of thumb is half the duration of the marriage, but I'm going to award it for the whole duration of the marriage. Why? Because the judge does have that authority to adjust. To your other point, we also have to take into account marital estate and the division of the assets and debts. So it may be, yes, a spousal support claim exists, but if you're getting a greater portion of marital estate, a judge may turn around and say, well, yeah, technically you're entitled to spousal support, but you're going to get it in the form of, say, retirement distribution, or you're going to get it in the form of the house. And so these are all factors that come into play. Whether or not there's been infidelity or domestic violence specifically, it is a factor in the sense of whether or not you're entitled to dependency, but it does not necessarily influence the exact amount or duration.
Right. And that is a problem, too, when it comes to the emotions. Mm-hmm. Because if you are victim of the financial abuse is big. I say it all the time. There's a lot of that going on. But especially if there's infidelity, too, it's like, I want to be reimbursed. Yeah. Because, there is the potential that all these monies that belong to me were used with a third party, and I want to get it somehow. And that, to me, means alimony or whatever that means. A lot of people I have that long-term marriage, they think they are entitled to alimony because there was infidelity, even though both spouses have work and they have good salaries.
Interesting.
So that is another, because remember, a lot of people, when they're going through the divorce and they're using the court for this resolution, they are trying to be right.
Yeah.
They want to fix the wrongdoing that was done to them.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for them to separate. So this person particularly doesn't say whether they had a part-time job.
Yeah.
Or they worked the first 5 years and then they worked the next 5 years of the marriage.
Yeah.
That is also has something to do with the alimony.
Well, and let's flip it for a second. Let's say the cheating spouse and or the abusive spouse was actually not the primary income earner.
100%. Yeah.
And if that is the case, the primary income earner actually is the victim to abuse or the survivor thereof. From a legal standpoint, we can say, hey, because that other spouse, the dependent spouse, cheated, you don't have to pay them spousal support.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with whether you're the wife or the husband. Or,
now, can we talk about forgiveness?
Oh. Take it away.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the
That's
attorney
very
here.
true.
The attorney can give you the law aspect of this, but if you find that your stay-at-home spouse was cheating, but you continued relationship, and basically, correct me if I'm wrong, you have actual relations with your spouse, the court may consider you have forgiven them.
Oh.
And then that doesn't count
Yes.
anymore, right?
Going back to every case is so unique.
100%.
It's one thing if you learn about the affair, you went to couples counseling, you tried to make it work. Yes, you had sexual relations
Right.
for, say, 6 months, still didn't work out. Okay, we could probably still bring up the infidelity. But if they cheated 5 years ago and you're like, okay, I forgive you, which we are all about trying to keep marriages
100%.
together and healthy, but healthy is that operative word here.
Yes.
And then the person continues to cheat, say even more than once, and you still don't leave them. And then suddenly it happens this one last time. You're like, hey, now I'm out. The courts may say, well, you've almost given them permission
100%.
to have extramarital relations.
And what if you cheat because they cheated on you?
Mm-hmm. And then both parties are cheating on each other. Well, and the term cheat even.
Well,
right?
that's so,
Right?
yeah.
It's a hard
define cheating.
define cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need another expert.
Yeah.
We can't do this.
Can't do this alone. But to that point, you have emotional cheating, which it has its toll.
100%.
You have the physical cheating. We hired the PI. We saw them enter the hotel room at 11 p.m., come back out 5 a.m. I've had that evidence before.
Oh, yeah.
And you see who's going in and out,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so you're like, okay, everyone can infer what happened in that hotel room. But on the flip side, it's like if both of you have done it, or it was so far in the past that a court can reasonably interpret the situation that you forgave them, then it's no longer a factor.
It's not. And there's just also that you say cheating, going to a hotel once in a while. Talk about years.
Yeah.
How many people have relationships outside their marriage for years and years and years. Yeah. There is not cut and dry, and there's no one way. And there's so many things that you have to take into consideration, and no case is the same. And you will get a judge that potentially will overrule all this and say, you know what? I don't care if she cheated. I'm going to give her alimony.
Yeah. Well, and here in North Carolina, we also have post-separation support versus alimony, which are the two forms of spousal support.
And you could get one and not the other, right?
Yeah, you could get post-separation support because infidelity is not necessarily prohibitive of post-separation support.
Right.
Now, the judge may say, okay, because of the cheating, you only get X amount for X duration.
Right.
But it's still, supporting spouse is still paying something.
Yes, until you can get to the alimony part of it.
Until you can get to the alimony part, yeah. All right, so we're going to do one more question, just because it kind of relates to this whole topic. I have a question for those of you who have been divorced or going through a divorce. Legally, can your spouse tell you that you can't have a roommate during the separation period? How is someone supposed to be able to get a place on their own if they don't make enough to pay rent and all other necessities?
This is personal response. Nobody can tell you where to leave. Or who to live with, unless there's a danger to the children.
Sure.
Right, of course. If you're going to have living with this person that they're doing drug deals or something, or there's some kind of history or criminal or something, well, yeah, of course, don't live with that person if you have children.
Yeah.
But as far as being able to meet your needs, and my answer to that spouse will be, okay, you don't want me to have a roommate. I need you to pay me
more money.
Some support.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Reality.
You want me to live alone? I will live alone. But that is just on a personal, just common sense, normal conversations with, divorce has none of that in it.
Well,
but
we can get involved as legal and divorce professionals before you even separate.
100%.
So maybe we don't ask this question before you've met with your attorney. Let's go ahead and try to resolve some of these financial, property, housing issues before you even separate from a legal standpoint. I mean, I literally have a case right now where the parties are agreeing, actually more than one case, where the parties are agreeing how to resolve their property and spousal support matters, and the house is listed to be sold and will be sold in a couple months. And then they'll separate once the house is sold.
And can we agree that's the best way to go about it?
Oh, yeah.
My biggest successful rate is with those that come to me before they even separate. When they come to get the information, they're trying to get established, understand what they need to do. They talk to their spouse, they talk to an attorney.
Yep.
And then we have a plan. And then you can gear that plan to, where do I have to go? Do I have to live in the same school district if I have kids? I need to move. What's the rent in that area? How are we going to figure that out? And then you talk about potential support and things of that nature. I think that makes it so much easier. Not that it will be easier in any way as a separation, is a divorce. However, you take away that heavy burden of the money, the custody, and the not knowing.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think social media is a great, great venue for people to get connected and things of that nature, but these questions are dangerous. The answers are dangerous. And when someone goes and takes action based on some of those responses, that even if you get an attorney to say, I am an attorney and I will say this, mostly they don't. They said, you should have a consult.
Yeah.
Because there's so many details.
And to all of these questions, we've already talked for well over what you could include on a response in a Facebook post or Instagram or whatever else. And, this person who asked this specific question is, don't get a place on your own if you can't pay rent yet.
Right.
Stay together if you can. If domestic violence is involved, that's a whole different, cup of tea.
Conversation, yeah.
But if you can sustain at least a couple more weeks or maybe even a couple more months, meet with an attorney.
Right.
And maybe you'll find out, oh, okay, well, we're going to split the investment account. Yeah, it's only in the other person's name, but that'll give me, $10,000, $20,000 to help me put down that deposit on an apartment. And maybe I won't need a roommate. Or even if I do need a roommate, which I do want to bring in, when we say roommate, we do mean roommate, not boyfriend or girlfriend.
Right. Yes.
Because that could influence a spousal support claim.
100%.
But if you are moving in with a true roommate, then we can address all that in any agreements that we come to.
Well, the roommate, this could be established that I got to go back to live with my parents.
Yeah.
I had to go live with my sister or my brother. I mean, we see that all the time. People have to separate. They have to go live somewhere. And roommate can take not a girlfriend or boyfriend situation, but a family situation where you go back to live with your parents. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're forever staying there and you won't lose any rights. And I think that's why the attorney comes into place. It's like, what happens to my case if I move out with my parents? I can't take him anymore. Maybe there's no domestic violence. You just can't stand to see his face or her face anymore.
Yeah.
And you need to go.
Yeah.
So how does it affect the claim?
Yeah.
Because in reality, living with your parents should be temporary, right?
Yeah.
It's like a temporary thing just to get out and try to get something moving.
Yeah.
Because the other side of this is you can't make anybody go.
Yeah. In North Carolina, you can't necessarily force someone out of the house to create
So sometimes you need to make these decisions. Now, how different it would be if you talk to an attorney, talk to a financial expert and find out exactly whether you need it or not, the roommate, and how can you adjust your finances in order to make it. Because that's important too.
Yeah. Agreed.
So, yeah.
As we both take a deep sigh, Maria, thank you with all of your knowledge from the financial perspective. I appreciate you being here at the Legal Lounge so we can answer some of these questions that we see on social media.
Well, I appreciate you having me here. I think that the best thing of this is getting out the right information and resources for everyone to understand what they can go. So I love doing this, and we could do that all day long, but they're going like this, so we have to go.
Yes. So until next time.
Until next time.
All right, we'll see you later. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.